Imagine being locked away in a cage crowded with many other men, women, and children who may have very well never committed a single crime in their life, being kept away from family members for long periods of time, being a 5-year-old child having your rights read to you in a courtroom with no one but an interpreter, which is not always given, and a judge speaking to you, feeling powerless as a mother or father when your children or child are taken away from you and not knowing what circumstances they are in or if you'll ever see them again. These are the recurring feelings that anyone detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is also known as ICE, face on a daily basis. This language barrier that is seen between ICE agents and immigrants are detained is one of the major issues causing the mistreatment towards immigrants. This communication problem also deprives immigrants access to essential rights such as having a proper legal representation in court, or at least a basic understanding on how to request the proper assistance needed in their situation. This is why a reform is needed in communication in order to restore the humanity within the detention centers. The speech will show how ICE detention centers violate human rights and how communication can restore and reform humane treatment for immigrants held within these facilities. First, I will begin to explain what ICE is and how it enforces immigration policies within the United States. ICE has a main mission to protect America from any form of illegal immigration that can possibly harm the country's public safety. According to the ICE official government page, there are over 400 offices in the United States and other countries. This form of national security was created in 2003 and has an annual budget of $8 billion to enforce the 3 branches of ICE, which are Homeland Security Investigations, known as HSI, Enforcement and Removal Operations, known as ERO, and Office of the Principal Legal Advisor, known as OPLA. HSI has a main goal to prevent any form of transnational criminal organizations that work to harm the U.S. national security. This form of investigation works closely to stop smuggling and crimes from entering into the United States. Specifically, these special agents and intelligent analysis stop cash smuggling, exploitation of children, weapons smuggling, narcotic smuggling, human trafficking, and identity and benefit fraud. ERO works to prevent any crimes that are committed by what they like to call criminal aliens, and people who enter or re-enter the country illegally. They also work to remove fugitives who committed a crime in their home country and are now in the United States where they have the possibility of committing another crime. The agents that work within this branch are responsible for the correct identification and arrest, transportation, holding within the detention center, bond and supervised release of the immigrant. OPLA is the largest branch as they serve to be the representative of the Department of Homeland Security, which is also known as DHS, in cases regarding immigration removal. Not only do the attorneys within this branch protect DHS and ICE cases, but they also represent ICE authorities in federal court hearings. While all 3 branches of ICE try to paint a picture of how clear the mission is, there are some ideas that they do not illustrate to their audience. The main goal that is portrayed in HSI is, of course, a major issue that is seen within the United States. Yes, any form of smuggling, whether it is drugs or people, is a crime that should receive a form of punishment. Yet, it seems that ICE targets families and individuals that come into the U.S. seeking asylum to live a better life. A reform of procedure in this specific branch would mean a change in focus from families and people who seek to do good and live an honest life to individuals that commit the crimes that they highlight in the HSI mission. Data that was gathered by Policy Counsel at the American Immigration Council, Aaron Melnick, stated that at the end of 2019, only 33% of immigrants at ICE detention centers had any criminal conviction at all. There are a lot of missing gaps within the ERO mission. They say that their mission to be very straightforward, but behind the scenes, the picture is very different from what they would like the public to see. The agents, a part of this branch, hold a responsibility to arrest and release the individuals within custody. However, it is this gap between the arrest and release that is the problem. Once they bring the immigrants to the detention center is where their lives immediately deteriorate. As you can see in this picture, which is present on the official U.S. ICE page, there is an ICE agent smiling and handing over a carton of juice to one of the detainees, trying to portray a happy picture. However, in this picture, you can see the reality of the inside of an ICE detention center. These are the conditions that they are forced to live and sleep in. This is a room of children stuck in a small room having no place to move around. And this is during the COVID-19 pandemic where no forms of social distancing is being practiced. A reform of detention center and structure and operation could dramatically improve the conditions in which immigrants are housed in. The third and largest part of the organization holds a power that is too powerful for a government organization to have, especially when their primary focus should be to provide fair opportunity to those in need. The attorneys within this branch are trained to a point where it's almost impossible for immigrants to win any of their court hearings. Linda Freeman is a filmmaker who was able to record many court hearings and witness many children cases. She stated, especially in cases regarding the youth, 9 out of 10 times children who are representing themselves in court are deported due to having lack of understanding and communication. In what possible way is a child that does not know the definition of what a lawyer is defend him or herself in court? It is a system that sets up the immigrants to fail in. A reform in communication can tremendously assist families and individuals that are set to represent him or herself in court. This reform includes actually having a lawyer present for the immigrant who knows the details of the case and is ready to prove to the justice system that the individual is truly trying to seek a better life to live in the United States. Now that you know what ICE and their mission is, it is time to take a closer look at the conditions immigrants face while they are placed in ICE detention centers. ICE detainees that are in the ERO custody are placed in ICE detention centers as they await trial. While in these centers, the conditions that they face are very similar, if not worse, to the conditions a convicted felon faces in jail. The majority of the ICE detainee population are immigrants who never committed a crime, asylum seekers, visa holders, individuals who have lived in the U.S. for years living an honest life, people facing medical conditions, and even babies. Often they are referred to by their bed number as if to dehumanize and justify what they are doing is moral. Ilora Mejorji is the director of the school's Immigrants' Rights Clinic and works with the U.S. government in order to ensure that they enforce proper care for children that are in detention shelters without their parents or guardians. While visiting the detention center and interviewing the young children, Mejorji stated, "I have never seen such degradation and inhumanity. Children were dirty, they were scared, and they were hungry. Many of the children had clothing that were covered in bodily fluids, including urine and breast milk for the teenage moms who are breastfeeding, due to not having access to a shower since being detained within the detention center. Lack of food is also seen within these centers. Many of the children are malnourished due to receiving very little food, with no access to fruit or vegetables, which is essential in a child's development. The detainees within the detention center are forced to wear a jumpsuit uniform where they have shackles around their ankles and arms for the majority of the day, which limits their ability to walk around. They're placed in a room where they have no privacy due to being around others who are also convicted and are forced to sleep side by side. There are multiple counts done throughout the day to ensure that no one has escaped, but this is highly unlikely due to having shackles around their ankles the entire day. And during this time, visitation is not permitted, even if the time the person that is visiting is the only time that they are able to. Detainees are able to have visitation with their attorney or family members during mealtime. However, they are forced to skip their meal and would have to wait until next meal time, which could be hours, to eat. In a PBS News report by a law professor named William Brigham, he presented first-hand videos that had covered the inhumane conditions children are kept in, using foils as blankets and forced to take care of other children. Another news report done by Catherine Hadro and Pro-Life Weekly News speak of mass hysterectomies done in ICE detention centers against detainees' wills. These are just some of the inhumane conditions and injustices immigrants face in detention centers across the United States. Lawyers recommend for their clients to write down any form of mistreatment that they may have experienced while in the detention center in order to discuss how to present this to the court that could possibly allow for the client to become released. While some of us had the privilege to stay home and practice social distancing at the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, this was not an option for the ICE detainees. American Civil Liberties Union had the opportunity to take a closer look at the detention centers during the pandemic. This organization stated cramped conditions and inadequate access to hygiene or medical care have created what one medical expert called a tinderbox for the disease. The Trump administration strived to detain as many immigrants as they could even during the pandemic. Instead of having these detainees go into supervised release so they can take proper precautions during this pandemic, they were instead kept in the detention center where they put themselves and their community at a high risk of contracting the virus, due to the Trump administration having this craze to detain as many immigrants as they possibly could. This caused immigrants to face the pandemic with no protection and ultimately increasing the COVID-19 cases. A reform in order to improve all conditions in ICE detention centers. With an $8 billion budget, this is achievable. Data has been gathered by the Immigration Detention Network from the past year show that 510,854 people were detained, and it cost $126.52 for the adult detention and $318.79 for a family detention. Not having the individuals that cause no harm to society within these centers can decrease the amount of people detained a year. That way, these immigrants can go about living their everyday life peacefully as they intended to do when first arriving to the United States. The money that is left over can be used to improve the living conditions within the facilities. Having access to clean clothes, a healthier diet, medical attention, and proper sanitation is just a small step of what the centers would be able to change for these immigrants. Allowing for all detainees to have access to a lawyer interpreter so there can be a clear communication of what the detainee needs. There should be agents who do speak other languages so they can communicate to the detainees that know little to no English in order to make sure that they follow the rules within the center. The simple fix in communication can prevent detainees from being within the detention center for years away from their families. Now that we know about the conditions immigrants face on a daily basis locked up in the detention center, we will have a closer look on how communication plays a major role in their court hearings. Many detention centers have courtrooms inside the facility where federal rulings occur in order to determine the future for the detainee that is standing in front of the legal judge. And majority of the time, especially children, they do not have a lawyer present by their side, and they must present their own case and formulate arguments on why they would be able to stay within the United States. According to the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, these individuals facing the hearings do have the right to an interpreter, but if they cannot find an attorney, the system will do nothing to help the individuals find one. Entering a courtroom for children that are detained by ICE is heartbreaking. Children flood the room without anyone to represent them. Immigration attorney Elor Mejorji stated, if they want legal help, they have to and usually pay for an attorney themselves. Many parents decide to bring their children with them as they travel to the United States in hope of a better life. At the border, these families are split up and the children are all alone and have no idea what is going on. They are given headsets during the court hearing in order to understand what the judge is saying, but it does not mean that these children fully comprehend this information. These are a few pictures from video filmmakers took while recording ICE court hearings for children. These are the headsets that they use in order for the children to understand what the judge is saying to them. It translated to the language that they speak. A reform is needed for ICE court hearings in order for immigrants to receive a fair chance on representing their case. A story done by Ms. Lerny showed that there has been cases where having an attorney makes a huge difference. As of 2014, more than 80% of children who showed up to court unrepresented were deported. For children who appeared in court with legal representation, only 12% were deported. Every single individual that is in ICE custody deserves to have a lawyer representing their case without any expense. The entire process is foreign to these individuals. They do not really know what they can do to make their situation better or probably defend themselves. This is why an attorney is needed in each case and why communication is essential in moments like this. Communication is not just understanding what someone is saying to you, it is also comprehending it. The judge could give headsets to children, adults, where everything is translated to them, but do they really understand what the judge is saying to them? Most likely not. An attorney is needed so they can sit down with their client and thoroughly explain what is going on and how they're going to help. Children are so vulnerable that they need this form of comfort in order to get by. It has been shown that there is a huge chance of not getting deported when having an attorney versus not having an attorney. Children and adults should not sit day by day wondering how they're going to prove to the judge they should be able to stay here and when they know very little English. They should not have to depend on maybe seeing a volunteer attorney that can give them advice on their case. Even though this is helpful, an attorney is needed for each step of the process so they can have a fair and equal chance of presenting their case. After hearing how cruel ICE detention centers really are, it is evident that ICE violates human rights in many different ways. ICE has been misusing the power that they hold as government officials. Depriving others of basic human rights and their humanity is not what we strive to be known for as a country. by the current and future generations. The injustices that have happened and will continue to happen in ICE detention centers and courts is an issue we should be ashamed of and are working hard to change through reforms in policies and practices within the infrastructure. No child, man, or woman should have to endure the cruelty immigrants face daily to the lack of communication and legal representation in these facilities and this modernized country. This country was built by immigrants. We should not be working hard to deprive immigrants of their rights, but rather work hard to help each other out and build a better life for all who seek a better future. Thank you.